Welcome to Laura's World. Today we have another episode for you guys. I was asked to read this book. That's what Junkies do. It's by a guy named Thomas Figlioli, Tommy Figs. He's from Brooklyn. And I ordered the book and I was waiting to get it so I could read it and do this interview. And I had gotten it like on a Thursday night or something. And I figured I'd read a couple of chapters, at least get a feel for the book. And I couldn't put it down. I was mesmerized. I was captivated. I can't even explain it to you. All I do know is that I totally understood everywhere he was coming from. This was full on, honest, raw, heartbreaking, heart-wrenching. And I think that's what it's all about, is knowing another addict or alcoholic's heart. And I can't wait to talk to him about it and get a little bit more feedback on it. So he should be coming in any minute now, and we're going to get a chance to talk to Tommy. Tommy.
Hey, how are you, Lori?
I am so good. I was laughing because I do these things, and every time I go to do them, I get so nervous.
I do too. I don't get nervous doing these. I get nervous when I speak on a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I know. And I apologize. I mean, I swear to God, I would have jumped in the car and came down to Brooklyn and did this in person.
That would have been good.
Yeah. One of these days.
I actually live in Staten Island now.
Oh, okay. Staten Island. I thought it was
Yes.
Brooklyn. You were born in Brooklyn though, right?
Yes, I was born in Brooklyn.
That I got right. Okay.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
We have a mutual friend, Steven.
Oh, Mr. Saki, yes.
And I totally screwed up where he was from too. So you're not alone.
That's all good.
Tommy Figs. Oh my God. I feel like you could have been my cousin. We could have totally hung out. Thank you for doing this. Number one.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. I truly do. It was weird because I didn't get to read Steven's book first before I interviewed him, because it was kind of a last minute thing. And then when I read it, I was like, shit, I really wanted to read yours first before we did this.
Yeah, I have to say, this is the first interview I'm doing that the person read my book.
Oh,
so I'm excited for that. I'm excited.
I got all my little bookmarks.
That's awesome. That's great.
But I absolutely loved it, and there's so many reasons why I loved it so much. And I was only going to read a couple of chapters, and then I was going to finish it over the weekend, and then contact you. And I sat at my dining room table, and I started to read it, and right from the beginning. And I'm not saying that because we're doing this interview. Everything, and from being from a real Italian family, my father and my mother both Italian. I know your dad was Italian, your mom was Irish, but
yes.
The whole idea of I was cringing actually. Wait till your father gets home.
Yeah, I was scared too.
I was petrified. And again, my dad never, ever laid a hand on it. But it was just that, how you describe that look.
Yeah.
That look. Never put us down per se, but it was just the little things, like you would say, you just never felt like it was good enough for him. And I'm the oldest of 5. And so I tried everything to make him proud. I played baseball. I didn't like baseball. I played baseball. I was the first girl on an all boys league back in the 70s. I knew he loved us. He just didn't know what to do with us, Yeah. And but as I got deeper into the book, I was also saying I did not have problem with drugs. I'm strictly an alcoholic. I did love cocaine for a little while.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. And it helped me to drink more, obviously. But I felt every single thing that you wrote, Tommy, every single thing. And I think that's why I identify so great with alcoholics and addicts, because it's the heart. we see each other's hearts.
Yeah.
And wow, the book was amazing.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I'm going to shut up because I'm
Okay.
Italian and I like to talk.
That's all good. That's all good.
And I would love to hear a little bit from you and share a little bit of what was going on and how you came to write the book.
All right. Well, I grew up. Well, let me start by how I came to write the book. I got out of treatment in February of 2016. So my sober day is January 27th, 2016. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And when I got out of treatment, I met my sponsor, and about 3 or 4 months later, my first task was to write out my first step. And he wanted to know how my life was unmanageable before alcohol and drugs.
Mhm.
So I had to go back into my childhood and really look at my life. I really look at some of the feelings I had growing up as a kid and into my teens and early adulthood, and really try to see what I was lacking and where my life kind of was awry without me really knowing it. And that turned out to be like a 30-page thing. And we sat in his basement and we read through it. And, he just looked at me and he understood, and that was it. And writing that kind of spurred me to writing my story. And I started writing it in my iPhone notepad, very informal. The first story I wrote was the story about hitting the kid in the head with the bat at the beginning. So I write that story because I used to tell that story all the time when I spoke. And then one night I told it in a meeting, and then I went home right away and I started writing it. And
just to fit in.
Yeah.
That peer pressure to fit in, and you don't want to do it, but
no, I didn't at all. But I did it, and that was the first story I wrote. And then I wrote the introduction after that.
Okay.
And then it just started flowing. And I handed it I worked for the New York State Department of Sanitation.
Mhm.
And I was working with this guy one day. Me and him were really close. He was an older gentleman and always very encouraging of everything I did.
Mhm.
So one day I said to him, do me a favor and read this and tell me what you think. And he read it, and he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, I don't know what you're doing hanging out with us, kid. He said, but you have a talent, and I really think you should pursue this. And it gave me the confidence to start pursuing it, because he had no stake in the game. He could have been totally honest with me, and he liked it. And he's not an addict, not an alcoholic, nothing. He just enjoyed the way I told the story. So from that, I went with it. And it was a process. It took me 3 years to write it. Certain parts were harder to write than others. Certain parts I couldn't put into words. It's my own life, but putting those feelings into words was difficult at times. And, long story short, 3 years later, this book came out, and it's just basically a reflection of my life and the road I took and how I got into recovery later on. And, it starts in my early childhood, in Brooklyn, New York. Like I said, that story about me wanting to fit in. I grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of guys, a lot of tough kids that I wanted to be like, and I wasn't a tough kid. I was shy. I went out, I played my sports, I had my friends, but all I wanted to do was that. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to be, I just didn't like that. But these kids were like that, and I wanted to be like them. So one day, I walked out of the house and they handed me this bat wrapped in tape with newspaper stuffed in it. They told me to go hit somebody with it. And I did it. I went, I hit this kid, and guy's father comes to my house and yells at my mother. My mother tells me, wait till your father gets home. And, my father was right out of Central Casting. He was a street guy. He had his connections, drove the big white caddy, the jewelry, the whole nine. And I looked up to him more than anybody in the neighborhood. And, he takes me out and he asked me why I did it. And I lied to him. I said, the guy made fun of mommy and he pushed me. So my father takes me into this restaurant, brings me to his friends, and says to his friends, basically, look at my son. Like, my son's a tough guy. And I turn around, my father's laughing and smiling. And I got congratulated and I got rewarded for doing this by the kids in my neighborhood and by my own father. And from a very young age, my brain told me that I had to do these things to fit in. And if I got caught, I would just lie to get out of it. And that basically was the theme of my whole life. you
I do.
know, and
I remember a couple of different things when you were saying, well, if I did this and did this and did this, then this was going to happen. You know, that whole thought process of trying to get
yeah,
away with something.
always,
And oof, yeah, it's a lot of work, isn't it?
always, it's a hard way to live. I said it. It was a full-time job living the life I lived.
Yeah.
You know, and I talk about it in the book 8 years later. I had a relatively normal childhood. Other than that, my parents were good to me.
Yep.
But it was all kind of a facade because my father was a serial adulterer and he had a lot of dealings in the street and he was a bad gambler. And all that stuff added up over the years. And eventually, my mother had enough. And she basically came to me with this whole story. And I said to her, I said, Mom, listen, if you're keeping him around for me, then I'm good. Don't worry about it. You have to do what's right for you.
Mhm.
By that time, I didn't enjoy being around my father. He became very difficult to be around. There was a story in the book that I wrote, that words that he said to me that hurt me. And I didn't really want to be around him anymore. So when she said that to me, I was all about getting rid of him, so to speak.
Yeah.
Until she actually did. And I was upset by it, because he was still my father. He was still the first man I looked up
Yes.
to.
Yes.
And it was difficult, and he really wasn't in my life after that. There was a few times, but nothing to speak of. So now, no male role model in my life. I'm 16 years old. I have my cousin living with me who was like my big brother and would do anything for me. But he was 29 years old at the time doing his own thing.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the guy to look up to at that time. So I kind of gravitated towards the street. And those kids that were hanging out that I wanted to be like were in the schoolyards now. And they were on the corners and they were smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and smoking weed. And I thought to hang out with those guys, that's what I had to do. And that's what I did. I started drinking at 16 years old. I started smoking cigarettes, started smoking pot. And automatically when I started doing that, I was accepted into this place that I wanted to be in.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It did for me right away what I couldn't do for myself. I thought I needed to do this to fit in with those people. And, right from the beginning, once I started drinking, that's all I wanted to do because it made me feel such a way. I talk about it in the book. When you're a kid, you don't associate fear and anxiety and insecurity. You just don't know those things when you're a kid.
Right.
I just knew that I didn't feel
right.
right in certain situations. My stomach would knot up. I would just feel very uncomfortable in certain situations. I hear a lot in meetings, as soon as that first sip touched my lips, I knew I was at home. I didn't know that right away. But after I drank and the effects started kicking in and I saw how I interacted with other people, I realized that all those feelings that I had were gone. And then much later on in my life, looking back on that, I realized that it was all fear and anxiety and insecurity, and the alcohol just washed that away. So, I leave Brooklyn in 1993. I get a scholarship to college. And now, I go up to college and the only people that knew me up there were my two roommates that I went to high school with. So we basically we were like, oh, we're up here. Nobody knows us. We could just reinvent ourselves.
Yeah.
And we did that from day one. All three of us lived in the same room. Everybody called us Little Italy, and it was a very fun time for our time. But as soon as the door shut and our parents left, I picked up that drink and I never put it down. And at 17 years old, I was a daily drinker. And at 17 years old, I won an award in my first year of college, most likely to wind up in AA. Yeah, I did. And I was, I was proud of that.
Yeah. Right.
I knew it existed, and the kid that had it, it was kind of like a rivalry. And I said, that's going to be my goal. And I set out to do this. And that's what I did. Meanwhile, I failed 5 out of 6 classes I was taking because I never went to class. And at the end of that first semester, I was like, I'm going to get thrown out of school. I have to do something. So it all goes back to the beginning where, just messing up and then trying to get out of it. I had to go to the dean of the school, and I basically had to play up my parents got divorced and my mother can't afford it. And
right. So somebody would feel sorry for you. Yeah. Pour you a drink.
Yeah. And they did, they told me if you bring your grades up, I couldn't get the scholarship back because I needed a 3.0 and it was mathematically impossible to do that.
Mhm.
But the dean told me, he said, if you just get over a 3.0 in your second semester, we'll give you a grant to subsidize what the scholarship was. And that's what I did. I went back my second semester. I got like a 3.4 and I was back in school. But, you know, I still drank, I still did, but I did what I had to do. It was a theme my whole college life. You know, it wasn't just that year. It happened my second year, my third year. And I always found a way to get out of it, whether it was getting a job on campus or, you know, going to professors or whatever I had to do, I did it. It would have just been easier if I actually went to class and did the work than the way I went about it. You know, I do that for 4 years. I'm 21 years old and I hang out in this bar in the town of Pleasantville, New York. That's where I went to school. The name of the bar was Foley's Club Lounge. And I was in this bar every night. And eventually the guy who owned it, he liked me. And he said, listen, you just want to work here because you're here so much that I'll just give you a job. So I got a job. And now I drink for free. I eat for free. I'm making good money.
Yeah.
And, you know, all my friends started coming to the place. We got a nice little crowd in there. And I started becoming friends with the town people and the police in the town, which was very handy at times in my life. And that was my life. I loved doing that. And 2 years later, you know, I graduate and now I'm supposed to go out into the real world and do what I have to do. But I don't want to, you know, I
He's like, I
love
don't
it.
wanna.
I love this life. I don't want to leave Pleasantville. So I get an apartment off campus. I worked in that bar. And then I get a call from a guy in Brooklyn who happened to be, he was a bookie. And he asked me if I wanted to work for him. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And right there, you know, I'm doing what my father did. And my father had died 2 years earlier. And my father died. He was 61 years old and he died by himself in an assisted living facility in Staten Island, New York, because he became homeless. You know, all the things he did and all the bridges he burned, nobody wanted him around anymore. And when he came to my aunt's house, basically begging for a place to live, she told him she didn't want him around. So my uncle Tony and my mother put him in this place, and that's where he spent the rest of his days. And you know, my mother's an angel, you know, and the last 2 years of his life, she brought him to the house for Christmas dinner because she felt bad for him. And I was 19, 20 years old at the time, and I didn't really want to hear what he had to say. But he sat down with me one night and he just said to me, he said, listen, Tommy, I'm sorry for doing what I did. I'm sorry for what I did to you and your mother. And don't ever do the things I did because look where it got me. And 2 years later, I get the call from that guy. And, you know, I do exactly what he did. So now, you know, I'm with a girl and she doesn't want any part of that. You know, the girl leaves me and now I'm hanging out with different people. I have to go start dating again. And again, I'm this insecure little kid and these people are taking ecstasy. So one night I said, okay, let me take one. And that one turned into 7 that night.
Wow.
And then it turned into an everyday thing. And there were days that I was taking 15, 20 hits of ecstasy
Really?
to do nothing. You know, one night it was like 2 a.m, the bar was closing and I was taking one and my friend said, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking some E. He said, for what? I said, I'm going to go home and watch the Met game because the Mets were opening up in Japan that year. They were playing at like 6 a.m. So he's like, you're going to watch the Met game on ecstasy? I said, yeah, why not? He's like, you know, you're never going to be able to do anything normally again if you keep doing this. And, you know, he was right. He was right. And, you know, 6 months later, I go to get that and the kid doesn't have any. And he pulls out the foil packet and it's cocaine, you know, and he hands it to me and says, this is Coke. He said, you've been drinking all day. He goes, this will sober you up. And in my mind, cocaine in my mind was a hard drug. Like I didn't want to do that. Like that was one of the things in my mind. The lines I didn't want to cross. You know, not that I knew anything about lines back then, but that's one of the ones I didn't want to cross. But I mean, he didn't have to twist my arm. You know, he handed it to me, and I walked into the bathroom at Foley's, and I put a little line on the toilet tank, and I did it, and I fell in love. You know, I felt like Superman. You know, the numbness, the energy, sober me up.
Yep.
And like we were talking about earlier, it just enabled me to drink even more than I already was. 2 years of that, and it gets very old very quick.
Mhm.
And the gambling's out of control, the cocaine use is out of control, the drinking's out of control. I start trying to sell drugs to support my habit. Every
Yeah.
time I tried,
Oh,
me and my friends were like, oh, we'll put in this each. And, we'd put it in and I'd always lose the money because I would just always do everything I had, and as it was going, I was like, oh, well, if I just sell this much, I'll be good. If I just sell this much, I'll be good. And then it was all gone and I just lost all my money.
yeah.
And then all the money I'm making doing the booking, I'm gambling it all away and I'm drinking all day, every day. And now I have no money. There were times that I had thousands of dollars and then 2 weeks later, I couldn't pay the rent. So I started borrowing money from my aunt, from the guy who owns the bar. And to pay him back, I started stealing from his register. And, people start noticing these things. I got an email earlier today from the guy, Joe, that I lived with up there. And he just read the book. The email is very long, but basically, he just said that him and a couple of other guys that I used to hang out with used to always talk about how they're surprised none of us ever died. And he said, none of us physically died. He said, but the person you were at that time died. He said, because it just took you over. And he was apologizing to me for not stepping in and being guilty. And I haven't answered him back yet. I have to, because he was in no way to blame for this. Everything was on me. I did everything I did, and that was all on me. Things it turned sour quickly up there, and I decided to move back to Brooklyn, and I moved back and I get this great job, Wall Street firm. And I said, as long as I stay away from the cocaine, I'll be good. I get back to Brooklyn. It was Memorial Day of 2000. And the first night I'm back, my friends are in the basement. They're smoking pot out of a bong made out of a Heineken keg. And they're drinking, and I'm like, I'm home, and
Yeah. You're like, all right,
I'm
I'm
home.
great. This is great. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I drank and I smoked pot for about a month. And then, that switch went off and I wanted cocaine. And I asked a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, of course we know where to get it. And he was all happy, so we go, we get it. And it was off to the races after that. I write about it in the book. I start getting sick. It happened once in a while when I was up at school, but I didn't know what it was. But I would wake up in the morning with the shakes and I didn't know what it was. And then with the cocaine on top of it, the anxiety was just unbearable. So I think I'm dying. So I go to the doctor and, I lie to them.
Of course.
And the doctor was a friend of mine. It was my mother's boss, but he was like a friend. And I would go there and he'd say, Tommy, do you drink? I was like, only a few beers when I go out, doc, nothing crazy. He's like, well, do you do drugs? No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
So with the information I gave him, soft spot that he had for me in his heart, because he was so friendly with my mother, he just wanted to make me feel better. So he prescribes me Ativan and Klonopin and tells me, listen, when you feel like this, take one of these and you should be all right. So that was my solution. I would drink, I would do coke all night. And then when I woke up in the morning and I couldn't get out of bed, I would take one of these pills and I'd be fine. And I could go about my day until I could get home at night and do what I really wanted to. And again, that could only last so long.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years later, I lose the job and I wind up in a psych unit in Long Island because I was just out of control.